They did not kill him with sword or flame. They set dogs upon him, starved, slavering beasts trained to rip the living apart. The crowd of Cassandreia gathered in silence, their hatred trembling on the air. And when the first dog lunged, Apollodorus's scream tore through the square like thunder. He had once been untouchable, a man who ruled the city with a gaze cold enough to freeze the heart of any soldier. Apollodorus of Cassandreia, once celebrated as a loyal officer of Alexander the Great, became something darker after his master's death. His loyalty died with Alexander, replaced by ambition that burned hotter than any forge. Macedonia in 316 BC was a land divided. The great conqueror's generals tore his empire into fragments, each claiming a piece of the world. Cities like Cassandreia became pawns in a deadly game of betrayal and revenge. In the chaos, Apollodorus seized control, promising safety to his people. But safety soon meant submission. His rule was not of justice, but fear. Citizens vanished into his dungeons, emerging only as bodies. He ordered executions on suspicion alone. Spies walked the streets in silence, listening for whispers against his name. The city lived under curfew, lit only by the torches of his guards and the smoke of burning homes. Apollodorus was consumed by distrust. He surrounded himself with walls, guards, and blood. He executed counselors who questioned him, priests who warned him, even childhood friends he believed had looked at him too long. At night, they said, he roamed his palace armed, muttering to shadows only he could see. But no fortress can protect a tyrant forever. Word spread that Cassandreia was fracturing. Former allies plotted his fall. Outside the city, Macedonian generals loyal to Cassander advanced, promising liberation. Within, slaves and soldiers alike began to turn their eyes from fear to vengeance. Accounts vary, but some say it was his own captain who opened the gates. The army of Cassander swept in like fire through dry grass. Apollodorus fled into the temple district, dragging what treasure he could carry. He had ruled through terror, now terror ruled him. When they caught him, there was no trial. The conquerors had heard of his crimes, how he had unleashed dogs on prisoners for amusement, how he had torn rebels apart in public squares. They decided that justice would take the same form as his cruelty. He would die by his own design. The announcement spread through Macedonia. People came from nearby towns, eager to see the end of the man who had turned their land into a nightmare. They arrived with children on their shoulders, torches in hand, whispering prayers and curses. The execution was not hidden. It was theater, punishment, and revenge entwined. At dawn, the soldiers dragged Apollodorus through the streets he once ruled. His robes were torn away. His hair, once oiled and perfumed, hung in mats of sweat. The crowd jeered, hurling stones and rotten food. His hands trembled, not with fear, but disbelief. He could not accept that the world had turned against him. They chained him to an iron post in the center of the square. The air was heavy with heat and hatred. The handlers brought out the dogs, 6 of them, great Molossian war hounds bred for battle. Their ribs showed through their fur, their mouths foamed with hunger. The smell of blood in the air drove them wild. The first growl silenced the crowd. The dogs strained against their leashes, claws scraping the stone. A soldier gave the signal. The chains were released. In an instant, chaos exploded. The first dog lunged, teeth sinking into Apollodorus's leg. Flesh tore with a sickening rip. He screamed, a deep, ragged sound that echoed off the marble walls. He tried to kick them away, but the second hound locked onto his arm, shaking its head violently. Blood splattered the ground. The crowd's gasps turned to a roar. Some turned away. Others watched, unable to blink. The executioners had achieved their spectacle. Apollodorus fell to his knees. The dogs swarmed him, one tearing at his side, another clawing into his back. His body convulsed as they dragged him down. His voice broke into hoarse cries, then choked silence. Still, they did not pull the beasts away. The punishment had only just begun. Each movement painted the square red. The soldiers looked on without mercy. The same hounds he had once commanded to kill now carried out their revenge. They ripped through sinew and tendon, exposing bone. His blood pooled in the dust, reflecting the morning light like polished glass. Minutes passed, though it felt eternal. The snarling began to fade. The crowd could hear only the wet sound of tearing and the heavy breathing of the dogs. When at last the beasts stepped back, nothing human remained, only tatters of flesh and the stench of death. His body, or what was left of it, was left for the animals to finish. As the sun burned higher, vultures circled overhead. The citizens of Cassandreia lingered in silence. For the first time in years, there was no fear, only release. Their tyrant was gone, devoured by the monsters he had created. In the days that followed, Cassandreia celebrated. His palace was looted, his statues torn down, but his death carried a darker echo. The violence that ended him was born from the same cruelty he had used to rule. The dogs had not just killed a man, they had revealed what power becomes when stripped of humanity. Historians later wrote of Apollodorus as a warning. His paranoia consumed his reason, his brutality consumed his rule, and in the end, those same instincts led to his ruin. His fate became legend, a story whispered whenever a ruler's cruelty grew too great to ignore. And so, history remembers him not as a leader, not even as a tyrant, but as prey, devoured by the very beasts he once commanded. The sands of Macedonia swallowed his bones, but his name endured, carried on the breath of every tale that asks, what happens when cruelty turns back upon its master? Would you have watched that day? Would you have cheered, or turned away as the dogs tore him apart? Justice, vengeance, cruelty, they blur together when soaked in blood. Apollodorus thought fear would make him immortal. In the end, it only fed the beasts that devoured him. His name was erased from the marble of Cassandreia, but his screams became legend, a reminder that power built on terror always ends the same way, torn apart by the very violence it commands. If you thought this was horrifying, wait until you hear about the man roasted alive in the brazen bull he created.